let's go over to the other game that was on the docket last night out in the desert, the Fiesta Bowl. It was Miami over Ole Miss 31-27. So much to talk about in this game because obviously the big storyline is Miami, right? Making the Cinderella run, quote unquote. I don't think we can necessarily call a program the caliber of Miami a Cinderella, but the way that the ACC was treated this year and the way that Miami, quite frankly, was treated and talked about with regards to being compared with Notre Dame week after week before they finally jumped them, I'm comfortable calling this a Cinderella story. They made it all the way to the national championship game as a double-digit seed. That was something that not a lot of people thought could happen. And the game that got them there was just an all-timer, all-time classic. You look at, just what we thought going in was that Miami's defensive line, when Mitch and I previewed this game last week, we thought Miami's defensive line would once again be the big difference, right? It actually wasn't. Ole Miss's offensive line held their own. Trinidad had some mobility that kind of neutralized that pass rush a little bit. Ole Miss actually had a 4-1 edge in sacks and a 5-1 edge in tackles for loss. So Miami had to find a different way to win. They had to find a way to win with their offense in this one, and they found the way, right? So my biggest thing, Garrett, and I'd love to get your take on this, is to make a deep run in this playoff, you really need some extraordinary efforts from guys that either haven't been key players or have maybe underperformed or just haven't been a part of your story up to that point. You need to dig a little deeper, find something else in the tank. Mark Fletcher has been that for this Miami Hurricanes team this year with the running that he's done kind of out of nowhere. We were not expecting that, but for Miami going into the playoff, last night it was Keelan Marion having a massive game, the long touchdown catch, and time after time just abusing those Ole Miss corners, drawing pass interferences, making key catches for first downs. But the biggest surprise, Garrett, was Carson Beck. I don't think anybody thought he had this in him to go toe to toe in a quarterback duel. He was, talked about as a bus driver this whole time, riding the defense, getting just enough offense. All he does is go out and go 23 of 37 for 268 yards and 3 total touchdowns. And he used his legs to scramble for some first downs and ultimately get the game-winning touchdown. So I think this game completely flipped the script on Carson Beck's legacy and really fixed his legacy when we talk about some of the all-time greats of college football, because he led a 10 seed to a national championship game. That's going to be a historic footnote no matter what happens next week against Indiana. And he did it by putting the team on his back when all playoffs long and all season long, it's just kind of been a running joke that, Carson Beck is going to screw it up eventually.
Well, and the thing that I was most impressed with is, obviously Carson Beck has the reputation he has, but we've seen him play really well in moments, right? Like at Georgia, he had moments where it felt like he got in a rhythm and he found the zone and he just kind of found this like perfect flow state where he couldn't miss passes. And
Yeah.
he did that at times, right? Even this year, there were moments where, wow, he looked incredible. He was making throws that had me, kind of falling backwards in my chair, just thinking, man, how does a guy put that much touch on a ball like that? And he found it. And to his credit, like they had to, what was it, like 4 13-plus yard drives or 13 play plus drives? Like that's kind of incredible to be able to run that many drives of 13 plus plays. You don't do that for anything but your quarterback, right? Your quarterback has to be able to not only understand what the plays are, get them in, run them effectively, find your spots, convert third downs, like all of that has to happen because of your quarterback. That's maybe the most impressive thing that he did. It wasn't the, airing it out necessarily. There were moments where he did that, fairly successfully, but his ability to drive the field, that was one of the things that I was going to bring into the preview show. Obviously wasn't able to make it, but I thought that Ole Miss was going to have an edge there, being able to play situational defense and really force Miami to drive the field, right? They weren't going to give up some of the big plays. They're going to make you drive on them. And that's what they wanted to do. And I think that's a good idea, right? Because it's really hard to sustain long drives in college football. Carson Beck did it. He absolutely did it. That's the thing that was most impressive to me. And on the last one, he did it having to hurry, having to kind of do some hurry up. And a lot of times it was with only 3 guys rushing and having to find a gap in an 8-man drop zone scheme, his ability to pick that apart, find the right guy, keep his team alive, it would have been very easy to not see a linebacker at some point in there. It would have been really easy to make the wrong read or try to force something on a 3rd and long, and he didn't do that, right? He made good decisions. He calmly led his team down the field, and that's why they are where they are. It's because Carson Beck was clutch. He knew exactly what to do in that moment. And somehow, we're talking about Carson Beck and Mario Cristobal as the clutch guys who found a way to pull it out at the end despite all odds. I don't know how that's the world that we live in right now, but the ghosts of Georgia Tech and you're not kneeling it and everything else, those can be erased, right? This is a much better, I think, coaching staff than it was a couple of years ago. Very clearly, they've worked on things and improved on things, and their story is incredible. What Miami's been able to do through this playoff run is honestly incredible.
You mentioned it, but that last drive is going to go down in the Miami annals, right? Of annals of Miami football history. 15 plays, 75 yards in 2 minutes and 55 seconds. They had 4 third down conversions on that drive. And you're right. When the pressure turned up, meaning not physical pressure from guys rushing him, but just the pressure situation, Carson Beck didn't fold. He found receivers time and time again. Those guys were running open. And quite frankly, I think that's just such a great story. I love that story. It would have been really interesting to see if he could have done it against his old team in Georgia, but Ole Miss certainly earned the right to be here, so I'm not going to disparage them for making it to this game. But yeah, you're absolutely right. This is an incredible story. I love that we have a relevant team from the ACC making a deep run in this tournament. That's just good for college football. As we try to avoid getting into this NFC AFC light situation, having a third conference be represented in the national championship game is absolutely huge on the grand scheme of things. I want to talk a little bit about how they won this game, Garrett, before we get into Ole Miss, because I think that can lead into some conversations about how they match up with Indiana. Just saw the opening line for the national championship game, by the way. It is Indiana favored. You want to take a guess at the number if you haven't seen it yet?
I haven't seen it yet. I would probably give them, it's tough. I might say Indiana minus 5.5.
It's close. It's 7.5. They're giving them more than a touchdown, which was,
more than
kind of surprising to me. But when you look at what Indiana's done the first 2 games in this playoff,
I don't. 6.5, but that felt disrespectful, so I kind of bumped it down.
It does. I think it's more acknowledging what Indiana has done than disparaging Miami at all. But I mean, I said on the preview show this week that I was a little nervous to say it, but I thought Indiana minus 3.5 this week was free money, and you see what happened. So
it was better than free money.
It was, you were cashing that after the halftime, I think. But yeah, Garrett, let's talk about how they won this game, because saw this tweet and I thought it was really funny. So this is from OptaStats on X. Miami is the only FBS or NFL team in the last 20 years to hold the ball for 40 plus minutes, amass 400 yards of offense, convert 10 third downs, convert multiple fourth downs, have 4 drives of 13 plus plays, all in the same game, regular season or postseason. And Garrett, how many points did they win by with all of those advantages?
That would be 4.
4 points. They still only won by 4 because they decided that the utter domination that they had at times on the ground and through the air with those deep pass plays, just decided that wasn't cool enough. And Shannon Dawson needed to open up the playbook and run every little cute trick play that he had. I'm thinking specifically in the third quarter when they really had a chance to kind of separate themselves from Ole Miss. They're driving 1st and 10 in plus territory, and they run a flea flicker, Garrett, and it gets not blown up by not a good one, and it gets blown up by the Ole Miss defensive line.
Was that the one that they called
It forced Carson Beck into an intentional grounding.
Yeah.
So it went from 1st and 10 at like the 35 or 40 of Ole Miss,
plus territory.
They lost 12 yards on that play. So all's well that ends well, obviously. And I think that if Parker Fleming over at Stats of War does a "Did we get beat that bad?" graph, it's going to be really interesting to see because I think both teams will have their case to be made that they had a lot of successful plays. But Garrett, at times it just felt like Miami was getting 9 yards a carry on the ground, and they just decided that that wasn't cool enough. Obviously, like I said, all's well that ends well, but that's a little bit of a red flag when you're starting to project them forward just a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think the Ole Miss defense had some massive issues. Like there are obviously some clear problems with what they were rolling out there. So that's maybe something to consider going forward. But I just think that, Miami's offense did a really good job against their defense because, like I said, Ole Miss plays good like situational defense, right? Like they've been really good against teams on third down at times, and there's been moments where they've actually played well, gotten some pressure, forced some mistakes. But even looking at Miami, they were 11 and 19 on third down. They were 2 and 2 on fourth down. Like the fact that they had 19 third downs tells you they weren't doing anything to really push the ball anyways. They were fine being in third and short a lot of the night. They were totally okay with a 3rd and 2 because they knew they could just probably roll you over real quick for a good 5 yards and you're okay. They, I mean, what they rushed for, I guess 3.7. It felt like way more than that. Well, I guess they ran 51 times, so that's part of it. But they just did a really good job, I think, overall. And you can say the reverse was also not true for Ole Miss. Ole Miss only 2 of 10 on third down. I know that they pushed the ball a little bit more. Their success was more in kind of big chunks, and obviously you're not going to get in very many third down situations when you're moving the ball in massive chunks. So that's part of it. But yeah, I just think overall, great job by Miami, and great job by Miami to overcome a guy like Trinidad Chambliss, who is so electric, so dynamic that he can bring his team all the way down the field to take that 27, what was it, 27-24 or something like that, or 27-23. They took this big lead all of a sudden late in the game, and you're thinking like, oh man, like now Miami's got to come all the way back down. Well, unfortunately, they did leave them a little too much time.
Well, but and Trinidad had a chance to win the game at the end. He threw it past the end zone that his receiver pretty much got his hands on, and arguably, if you're an Ole Miss fan, especially, might have gotten pulled down while he was trying to catch
and
that.
that's the thing, and I want to address that for a second. I had this thought about it last night. It bothers me more than anything that never gets called on like Hail Mary attempts, and that wasn't even that much of a Hail Mary because it was only like 30 or 40 yards. But that like contact,
there's no rules on those,
shoving,
and it's
for some
a
reason
problem.
doesn't exist on the last pass of the game. They never call it. So I'm not gonna. If I'm an Ole Miss fan, I'm pissed about it. I want you to call it, but I also got to kind of understand, right? Like they never called that on those plays. You probably had a good case that you should have been running a play from the 2 on a final untimed down to go to the championship game. But it's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts at this point with that, unfortunately. So you got to convert a lot more early on. You got to convert more than 2 of 10 on your third downs. You got to score a lot more points than 27 if you want to write to say, yeah, I want to go play in that championship game.
Well, and I think going into this one, if you told me going into this one that Ole Miss was going to score 27 points, I would have told you that Miami's in trouble because I didn't know that the offense would keep up. And that would sound like to me either there were some defensive scores or some turnovers by Miami that set up short fields, or Miami's defense just wasn't playing up to the standard they had set in the first 2 rounds. And I think the latter was true. I mentioned that they weren't getting home to Trinidad Chambliss. They were pressuring him, but he was handling that pressure really well. They also dropped probably 4 interceptions that they literally had one or more DBs on the play had 2 hands on. There was that one tip drill one too that was just absolutely insane that no one came up with that in the first drive of the second half. Yeah, just insane. So I think Miami can look at this. A lot of the stalled out drives on offense, the so close to a couple turnovers on defense, and say, yeah, we were right there from really running away with this game and making everyone think that we're going to give Indiana all they can handle next week. Flipping it over to Ole Miss, though, I think they're probably kicking themselves a little bit as well because they had 5 drives ending in field goal attempts. They did have the dropped INTs, but they had a quarterback that was moving the ball better than anybody had on this Miami defense since like early November when SMU was doing it. So I think that Ole Miss has nothing to hang their heads about here. This was a great run, especially considering the circumstances. There's obviously a lot up in the air with the future. The NCAA denied Trinidad Chambliss's waiver. He said he's going to fight it. He has an NFL decision to make on his end as well. But switching it over to Ole Miss, I guess, Garrett, and kind of projecting forward for them, did this run through the bracket, beating Tulane, beating Georgia, coming up just short against Miami, did that give you enough confidence in Pete Golding to believe that he can kind of continue to have Ole Miss towards the top of the SEC like Lane Kiffin did?
Oh, yeah, especially because I think the thing that you can continue to maybe not milk, but the thing you can continue to try to use a little bit is that chip on your shoulder about what Lane did and how he doesn't believe in y'all's ability to win a championship and all that. This showed that, yeah, obviously Ole Miss was a couple of plays away from being in a championship at the very least. And honestly, I think they might have had a maybe slightly better chance just because of what Trinidad Chambliss is, as opposed to what Miami, maybe has and what they're bringing in now. Again, that's not saying that Miami's not the better team. They clearly played better than Ole Miss, and maybe their style of football will end up slowing it down for Indiana, and they can get in a little bit of a rock fight there. I don't know. But that would have been an electric one to see from just a fireworks standpoint of Ole Miss versus Indiana. But I do think that this proves that, if you're Ole Miss, you can win a championship, right? Like you were right there. They've been competitive in the SEC for a long time. They've been kind of perennial 10-win, 11-win, times. They've been there for a while. They've done a really good job building their program up. And I liked one of the things that Pete Golding mentioned. He mentioned, kind of earlier in the week that it wasn't built by just one guy. So it's not going to be one guy that derails it. I think that's the right way to think about a program, right? It's not just one person that built this program up these last, 5 or 6 years for Ole Miss. It's been an entire effort by an entire staff. And if Pete Golding's going to, stick around and continue that legacy, I think he's going to do a really good job there. It obviously got to keep dominating some portal because that's a lot of what they've done. Your evaluations have to keep being good, right? You got to find ways to go put some talent on that roster, but I think they can probably continue to do that.
Yeah, speaking of the portal, both these teams that lost this week, Oregon and Ole Miss, the one bright spot is you have complete focus on the last week of the portal, right? Like keeping your guys for next year, going and getting the pieces that you need. Obviously, you'd much rather be playing for a national championship, but if you're looking for a silver lining for the future, you do get to really lock in on the portal this week because our timeline is just stupid in college football, but that's a rant for another day. I'm with you. I think Ole Miss has a lot of potential. I'm worried about them long term just because we've seen this happen at programs like Ole Miss before, right? Like the big coach goes. I'm thinking of Mississippi State even after Dan Mullen left for Florida. It's been really difficult. Yes, they had some nice years under Mike Leach where they fought for bowl eligibility, but it's been really difficult for the coach that found the magic at a really hard place to win. I'd say the same thing if Clark Lee left Vanderbilt. I'd say the same thing. I'm really interested to see what Will Stein can do at Kentucky, right? That level of program in the SEC. Ole Miss, I think, traditionally has been above those other ones that I mentioned, certainly, but not by a ton historically. They've had some long drought years in the not too distant past. So going to be very interesting to monitor that situation. They're off to a good start in the portal this year, so I don't think that the fall off is going to be too hard. I think they made a deal with Quan Lacey to come back, and they're looking to supplement him as well and keep him fresh. So that's going to be awesome. And we don't have to wait long for Lane's return to Oxford. It is week 3 next year, Garrett. Saturday, September 19th in Oxford. SEC schedule makers did not give Lane a pass in year 1. So they will get to go to
and
Oxford.
Good for them too, right? And we all know that that's going to be the game day location, and like that's going to be where everybody. Yeah, you don't miss that.